Welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. U.S. lawmakers propose $1 billion in funding to help domestic cell phone carriers replace Chinese network equipment, seeking to eliminate national security threats. Former Ukrainian Prime Minister calls for investigation into Joe Biden's son, seeks to find out if he engaged in illegal activities while on the board of a Ukrainian gas company. The House voted to end the national emergency at the border soon after the Senate did. See what this could mean for U.S. border security. DoorDash data breach affects 5 million people in San Francisco, customers, merchants, and delivery drivers, but only if they join before a certain date. The U.S. is sending air defense equipment and U.S. troops to Saudi Arabia, showing heightened concerns over Iran after Saudi oil field attack. The U.S. has more equipment on standby if it's needed. U.S. lawmakers are proposing a $1 billion fund to help domestic wireless providers replace equipment they bought from companies including Huawei and ZTE on national security grounds. NTD's Penny Jo has more.
Today, the first hearing.
The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence has stated China has, quote, the means, opportunity, and motive to use telecommunications companies for malicious purposes.
Bipartisan lawmakers say the funding can alleviate some burden on small and rural wireless providers to comply with national security regulations. These providers often choose Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE for their low prices. Some small providers voiced their concern that the transition should not leave the area completely uncovered, since many of them are the only provider in the area.
It'd be like selling your car before you buy your new one. You're going to be walking.
Huawei is the world's largest telecom gear maker and has been on a U.S. trade blacklist since May. The U.S. government says their equipment could be used by Beijing to spy. Huawei is also a leading producer of surveillance camera and facial recognition systems. The company has sold its security tools to African governments to spy on political opponents. Huawei's CEO has reportedly complained about the difficulty for the Chinese company now to raise funds and to apply for bank loans from Western banks. He attributed that difficulty to U.S. sanctions. The U.S. ban on American companies doing business with Huawei will go into effect this November. Penny Jo, NTD News.
And today, stocks of several Chinese companies slid following a report from Bloomberg News saying the White House is discussing delisting Chinese companies from U.S. stock exchanges. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more.
Technology stocks, which are particularly sensitive to the swings in the trade conflict between the U.S. and China, accounted for much of the selling. Bloomberg cited an unnamed source as saying the Trump administration is considering ways to limit U.S. investors' portfolio flows into China. Shares of Alibaba Group Holding, JD.com, Baidu, and others fell between 2% and 4% in afternoon trading. China's yuan fell 0.4% in offshore markets against the dollar after the news, nearly the weakest compared to U.S. currency in about 3 weeks.
My recommendation for the people watching is, if you can't avoid that, if you're not in the business of trying to trade daily, that you do avoid that and you focus on the fundamentals.
One analyst told Bloomberg this could be a way for the U.S. to provide safeguards for American investors while restraining China's growth. The report cites 3 unnamed sources as saying the U.S. might also put limits on the Chinese companies included in stock indices managed by U.S. firms, but that it's still not clear how that would be done. As of February, 156 Chinese companies were listed on the NASDAQ and New York stock exchanges. This could be a blow to the Chinese economy, which has suffered under the U.S.-China trade war. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Ukraine's former prime minister says the country should investigate the activities of Joe Biden's son to establish whether his role in a Ukrainian gas company complied with Ukrainian law.
Mykola Azarov said he was not aware of any evidence suggesting wrongdoing on Hunter Biden's part, but added it was in the Ukrainian public interest to ascertain the legality of his activities. Everything that I now know about this company, that the son of the vice president took part in it, now explains the position that the vice president occupied. He paid too much attention to Ukraine. Former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden has denied using his influence to get Ukraine's prosecutor general fired in order to prevent him investigating his son's involvement as a director on the Burisma Holdings Limited board from 2014 until at least 2018. The spotlight follows the release of a White House memo showing that in a July phone call, President Trump asked his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, to have prosecutors look into Biden's activities.
The House followed the Senate today in voting to end the national emergency at the southern border. NTD's Holly Kellum has more on how this is unlikely to change anything.
The House voted 236 to 174 today to end the national emergency due to the overwhelming flow of migrants showing up at the southern border. President Trump used the emergency declaration to unlock funds for border security. The national emergency diverted $3.6 billion from military construction projects. Trump called the national emergency after Congress refused to appropriate funds for a border wall, which led to over a month-long government shutdown. This is the second time both chambers have tried to end the national emergency. The last time, Trump vetoed it, and neither chamber had the votes needed to overturn his veto. This is likely to happen again. Trump is expected to veto this resolution as well, and Congress would need a two-thirds majority in each chamber to overturn the veto. While touring the border wall earlier this month, Trump said the situation still constituted a national emergency.
Consider the country, the situation at the border, a national emergency.
Yeah, sure.
And how will you measure success? When will you withdraw that?
Well, I think really the success is going to be when the wall's built, when human traffickers can't go through.
Trump declared a national emergency at the border in February, 2.5 months before the number of migrants reached a high of 144,000 in May. Due to actions taken by the White House, the number of people apprehended at the border have gone down, but Border Patrol says it's still above normal.
Although we've had a 43% decrease from May to August of this year, we're still 55% over last year. This is still a crisis.
In August, 64,000 people were apprehended at the border. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
The Trump administration says it plans to lower the number of refugees to be resettled in the United States in 2020 to 18,000 in an attempt to clear the backlog.
According to the State Department, the cut is necessary to clear the buildup of claims and the security and humanitarian crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border straining the immigration system. The State Department said the current burden must be alleviated before it can resettle many of the people.
The cap is divided up differently than it has been in the past. It's put into categories, not just geography, as maybe you've seen in the past.
Under the new cap, the U.S. will accept up to 5,000 people fleeing religious persecution, 4,000 for Iraqis who have assisted the U.S. military, and 1,500 spots for people from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. An additional 7,500 migrants seeking family reunification and who have already been cleared for resettlement could also be accepted. Along with the new cap, President Trump also issued an executive order which would seek the approval of state and local governments before resettling refugees in their communities.
And nearly 5 million people in San Francisco have had their personal data breached in connection with a food delivery company.
DoorDash, a food delivery service company headquartered in San Francisco, announced Thursday a data breach affecting 4.9 million people. The company says they found unusual activity with a third-party service provider earlier this month and did some investigation. They found that some user data was accessed on May 4th this year. Those affected are consumers, delivery drivers, and merchants who joined the platform on or before April 5th, 2018. They said those who joined after that date are not affected. Information accessed included names, email, and addresses. For some, the last 4 digits of credit card information and bank accounts were accessed, but the company emphasizes that full numbers were not accessed and is not enough to make fraudulent charges or withdrawals. In addition, about 100,000 delivery drivers' licenses were accessed. The company's spokesperson referred us to their website's FAQ page when we reached out with questions. The service company has added security to its data and asked that those affected change their passwords. Eileen Ng, NTD News, San Francisco.
The Pentagon says it will send additional U.S. troops and air defense systems to Saudi Arabia to help the kingdom protect itself against Iranian attacks.
The air defense equipment includes 1 Patriot missile battery and 4 advanced Sentinel radars that can track drones and cruise missiles. The Pentagon said 2 more Patriot batteries and a THAAD missile defense system are also ready to go to Saudi Arabia if needed. The Pentagon says that the sending of military equipment demonstrates the United States' quote, commitment to regional partners and the security and stability in the Middle East, unquote. Since last week, the U.S. has been deciding how to respond to what U.S. officials call an unprecedented Iranian attack on Saudi oil facilities that took place September 14th. The U.S. and several EU countries have blamed Iran for the attack, which Iran denies it was behind. The Trump administration is also considering other non-military actions against Iran, including cyber attacks on the country's infrastructure.
Hong Kong protesters rallied at a central square in Hong Kong to show solidarity with activists who were arrested and are still detained.
The glory of piano masterpieces from the Baroque, classical, and Romantic periods. Pianists from all over the world will showcase their talent and bring back the pure authenticity, goodness, and beauty of piano music. The 2019 NTD International Piano Competition, September 26th through 28th at the Baruch Performing Arts Center. piano.ntdtv.com.
Hong Kong protesters rallied at a central square in Hong Kong to show solidarity with activists who were arrested and are still detained.
Thousands of protesters attended the rally at Edinburgh Place, calling for an investigation into the Sun Uk Lang detention center. Many said they wanted to know about the fate of protesters who were detained there during earlier demonstrations. Mostly it is to shed light on the people who were arrested and detained at the Sun Uk Lang detention center and their situation. There isn't any CCTV inside, no information to show how the protesters were treated inside. The rally today is to support the people who were abused in Sun Uk Lang detention center. Things are unknown and nothing was shared with the public, so we came here to support them.
The Hong Kong police can arrest people who they believe are suspects, but they can't abuse us.
Local news reports say police have been arresting people at random, and once detained, treat them inhumanely. Some reports say that they are even tortured. Hong Kong lawyer Daniel Wong says he saw protesters who were severely injured after leaving the detention center. Protesters went to the hospital by themselves. I went to the hospital to see them. They are seriously injured. This was caused by police batons. The marks were visible on their backs. You can see all the marks, many, not just one. This weekend marks the 5th anniversary of the start of the Umbrella Protests, a series of student-led democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong that started in 2014. Thousands of people are expected to rally on Saturday evening. Protests are also expected on Sunday to mark Global Anti-Totalitarianism Day, with solidarity events planned in cities across the world, including Paris, Berlin, Taipei, New York, Kiev, and London.
Also condemning attacks in Hong Kong, members of the spiritual discipline Falun Gong. They gathered in front of the Chinese embassy in D.C., protesting a violent mob attack on a practitioner in Hong Kong, which they say was linked to the Chinese Communist Party.
In Washington, D.C., Falun Gong practitioners condemned the attack and its uncanny closeness to other similar attacks by the CCP in communist-controlled China.
In Hong Kong, and worsen the situation there. We see the same terror, violence, and deceit that the CCP has demonstrated during the persecution of Falun Gong in mainland China, being extended to Hong Kong and causing an escalating human rights disasters there.
An ancient Buddha school spiritual practice banned by the CCP is still legal in Hong Kong and elsewhere in the world.
We must put a full stop to the CCP's erosion of universal values and its violent behavior.
Liao Qiulan practices Falun Gong in Hong Kong. She was attacked by two strangers on the street on Tuesday. On the same day, Hong Kong Democratic Party lawmaker Roy Kwong and a female reporter of Apple Daily were also attacked by unidentified mobs.
To the extent that the government of China is supporting, encouraging, rewarding people for engaging in this kind of behavior, I think it's an incredibly negative image for China to acquire.
Senator Ted Cruz on Thursday spoke out against the communist regime's persecution against Falun Gong practitioners in China.
Tyrannies and dictatorships fear the truth.
The U.S. Congress is currently considering a Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. If passed into law, it would impose sanctions on those responsible for repressing human rights in Hong Kong, among other measures meant to stem the tide of violence. And President Trump this week, speaking at the UN, said human rights were innate divine rights.
On the principle that our rights do not come from government, they come from God.
Reporting by Kitty Wong, NTD News.
Russia is saying its border guards are detaining 3 North Korean fishing vessels and 262 crew members for poaching in waters that Moscow considers its own exclusive economic zone.
The crew and vessels and several motorboats have been taken to Russia's Far East port of Nakhodka for investigation. Officials later confirmed the border guards have seized 30,000 squid as well as illegal fishing equipment. A poaching activity of 3 small vessels and 5 boats belonging to North Korea has been stopped in the Russian waters of Japan Sea. 262 North Korean fishers, crew members were detained. It is the second such incident this month. Russia detained 2 North Korean boats in its territorial waters in the Sea of Japan on September 17th after one of them attacked a Russian patrol. Moscow summoned a North Korean diplomat over the incident. There are frequent disputes over fishing rights in the Sea of Japan, which is shared by Japan, Russia, North and South Korea. In July, Moscow accused Pyongyang of illegally detaining one of its fishing vessels. North Korea said the crew had been detained for violating the rules of entering its territory. NTD News.
Up next, astronomers make strange new discovery, changes the way they think about how planets are formed. More on that when we return.
% of the news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. Media shapes your perceptions of the world around you. If you're not getting an accurate source of media, you're not going to have an accurate understanding of the world. The mission of Declassified is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This isn't just a mission of the channel, it's a mission of those involved in it. It's something we truly believe in. Declassified is independent, not controlled by any special interests, and we never will be. They don't tell you what you can and can't cover. They say prove it and you can publish it. Corruption has been allowed to exist in this country because the people we depend on to expose it are the ones involved in it. The Epoch Times is a non-partisan media. That means we don't stand for any political party. Our values are truth. One of the foundations of a free republic is an honest media. Without knowing the truth of the situation, without understanding the backgrounds of individuals, without knowing what they really stand for, what they're really doing, you're not going to be able to vote. You're not going to be able to make the decisions that this country depends on us to make. You can't have a free republic without an honest media, and Declassified tries to fill that role.
Pianists gear up to showcase a challenging commissioned piece in the semi-final at NTD's 5th International Piano Competition in New York. 6 made it to the finals.
From Baroque to Romantic eras, classic repertoire most pianists are familiar with. But today's challenge, a special commissioned piece that blends both East and West.
It's a mix of Chinese melodies and but transformed somehow in different traditional European music.
An arrangement of a vocal piece composed by the artistic director of Shenyuan Performing Arts.
And there's something so pure and original and something from the earth about it. You know, it comes directly from the people. It's not kind of stilted in the way that some conservatory composers can make their music.
Something that reminds the players of their roots and that they cherish.
And I think it's very important to stay in touch with our history and with the great things that artists and thinkers have contributed.
Especially the Chinese piece that we were given, you know, it's a beautiful culture that we don't want to lose.
Started in 2008, NTD's International Piano Competition preserves traditional arts.
I think it's incredibly important to stay in touch with traditional music because that's how we see where we got to where we are now.
As the classics gradually disappear from common use, NTD's mission to promote and showcase the classics resonates with these contestants.
Many people just don't know classical music very well, and so it's important to try get them back because it's good for their health, like health and culture of people.
The finals will be broadcast on NTD's website and Facebook on September 28th. NTD News, New York.
Astronomers discovered a giant world orbiting around a tiny star. The discovery is changing people's ideas about how some planets are made.
Astronomers say they found a Jupiter-like planet orbiting a star that's just 12% of the Sun's mass.
So, compared with the Sun, the star where we have found this planet is the Sun is much more bigger. It's about 8 times bigger than the star we have observed. And but we have found a planet that it's like Jupiter. So for this kind of stars, we would have expected a planet like Earth.
The discovery is putting the theory about how planetary systems evolve under scrutiny. Existing research suggests a giant planet almost half the size of Jupiter should not be orbiting such a small star, but this one may be almost as big as the star, an M-type red dwarf. These are the coolest, smallest, and the most common stars in the universe.
And we wanted to make sure that this planet was special and that it was not possible to explain it with the current formation models. So these colleagues trying to run simulations with their models, and they told us, okay, this is a very new kind of planet that what you have found.
The planet seems to have formed straight from gas. It was spotted by researcher Juan Carlos Morales and his colleagues at the Institute of Space Studies of Catalonia in Spain. The astrophysicist believes new technology available to researchers means they could discover much more about the universe, which is not as we expected.
And up next in the UK, a business that runs on the waste produced by other businesses, bringing back to life items that were on their way to landfill. More on that when we return.
The lasting beauty of traditional oil painting. Realistic style. Brilliant. Moving. Expressive. 2019 NTD Television International Competition for Figure Painting in Oil. Guided by truthfulness, kindness, and beauty. We invite you to join us on our journey back to traditional art. Gold Prize Award of $10,000. For more detail, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
From waste to beauty, this luxury brand gives another life to items heading to landfill. NTD's Jane Werrell in the UK has the story.
Heading to landfill before this entrepreneur decided to rescue it.
Although it's no longer fire hose and it can no longer be used to save lives, that doesn't mean the material has to die.
The story begins in 2005 in Croydon, South London, when Canadian-born Cressy caught sight of disused fire hose for the first time.
I saw this beautiful rooftop filled with coiled up, gorgeous red hoses. It was really at that moment that I decided to rescue the fire hose. I knew.
Shocked that the London Fire Brigade sent several tons of it to landfill every year, she soon set to work with her partner James, creating prototypes in their Brixton flat share with a budget of just $50. Their first success was a belt. Now their products range from iPad cases to luxury handbags. By 2010, they were turning all the unwanted fire hoses from the London Fire Brigade into fashion items, with 50% of the profit going to the firefighters' charity.
The business model that we have is based entirely on goodness and goodwill. It's a partnership, it's a collaboration. We're friends, they're stakeholders. We're in this together.
Here in their workshop in Kent, the company gives another life to 15 other types of so-called waste. Decommissioned parachutes line their bags, and they've collected these offcuts. Stored here is 3 days' worth of Burberry's unwanted leather, cut into interlocking shapes and created into something new in workshops like this one in central London.
We take something with no value and we embed it with as much love and care and attention as we can and turn it into something of high value.
Globally, there's 800,000 tonnes of leather waste produced per year. Over time, Cressy wants to work on repurposing waste from the wider leather industry. A business excited by problems and growing to solve them, reclaiming what looks like landfill and turning it into luxury. Reporting from the UK, Jane Werrell, NTD News.
And that's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.